Even before President Trump took the oath of office to become the 45th president of the United States, its agenda was met head-on at pretty much every turn. Those resisting him would argue it's to save the country, while others, like our next guest, say the resistance is actually doing more harm than good. Joining us now is Kimberley Strassel. She's the author of the book, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. Kimberley, such a pleasure to have you here.
Baker, great to be here.
So what's really the core argument at this book?
So the core argument is that if you listen, for the past 3 years, people have been saying Donald Trump is destroying institutions, undermining democracy, is a budding autocrat. And what I did is I tried to step back and look at it objectively. I do think this president is obviously norm-breaking in many regards, especially, you know, his speech, I think his rhetoric and his tweets and things. But I think if you look at the institutional damage that's being done out there, that's being done by those who oppose him and who feel as though they're entitled to break all the rules in their effort to get rid of him.
Yeah, I want to go on this point just a little bit more because Ron Johnson, who we also know is a big supporter of the president as well, kind of echoed something similar to what you said. He basically said the president has changed the entire country, not so much for the positive either, but he did say Bill Clinton did the same thing. He said, quote, "It's unfortunate. I revere our Constitution. I revere these institutions, including the office of the presidency. It would be nice if everyone conducted themselves, I guess, the way that we are in Wisconsin." If President Trump wasn't the president, if this was just Jeb Bush or somebody else that won the Republican nomination, would you say that there's still erosion going on within the process, or was it because of President Trump that this happened?
So I think there would still be some erosion and some pushback, because I really believe that part of the hatred out there is not just against Donald Trump. I think a huge amount of it is about Donald Trump, but part of it's about the Democrats having lost in 2016. They were really banking on a victory there. I think it really wounded them that they didn't. So I think any Republican would probably get some of it. But then again, it's hard to see some of this rule breaking having happened if it was another person. I mean, can you really imagine the FBI and Department of Justice cooking up a counterintelligence investigation into the Jeb Bush campaign? Probably like harder to imagine, right? And because Donald Trump is an outsized character, a lot of people seem to think that regular rules don't apply, any tactics can be used against him.
So what would you say to Nancy Pelosi and how she should be dealing with President Trump right now?
Well, look, I think everyone out there, even right and left, you know, you just had that great report. People want things dealt with that are problematic in their life. And, you know, the thing is, there's some really big areas on which right and left agree. Things like the trade deals, like the trade deal with Mexico, for instance. I don't see how any of that is possible if the Democrat stance is going to be impeachment all the time. Not just because it sucks up all the air, but because it means that how can you turn around and say to your base, yeah, we're going to work productively with a guy we just said was a traitor. You know, so it's a very difficult position. In agreeing to go forward with this impeachment inquiry, she basically said we're not getting anything else done the rest of the year.
You've also argued, though, about the whistleblower in particular, saying the whistleblower, based on the reports we've heard, potentially might be a registered Democrat, that basically takes, that is a big part of a lot of this as well. Explain that.
Well, it undermines it. So again, I have a section on impeachment in the book, and we have to remember impeachment is one of the most sober and serious tools that Congress has.
There's a reason why we haven't done it in a long time.
And there's a reason why we haven't done it, and it's also a political process. And when Democrats first started this, they said, we're not going to go down this road unless we can convince Trump voters too, and Republicans too, of the validity of our cause. Obviously, they have not hit that bar. They were pushed into this by their Democratic base. And I think that if you go out and you're going to have a secret impeachment testimony, and you're going to have a whistleblower, no one who can see who they are, and then you try to convince the average voter out there that this is a legitimate use of the impeachment power, I don't see how you do that. But it's another example of us breaking some really core norms in the country, which is the subject of the book.
Do you believe that if, let's just say there's another whistleblower, it seems like that might be represented by the first whistleblower's same attorney, and if this second whistleblower is somebody that worked in the White House, do you feel like that would change a lot of Trump fans' perspective on the whistleblower? So
here's why I don't, because right now a lot of those Trump voters, if you go and talk to them, they feel that there's a double standard, okay? And the double standard is this, that everyone, Democrats in the media for 3 years said, oh, it's perfectly fine that Hillary Clinton's campaign sent Russian information to the FBI that was used against the Trump campaign. But now somehow it's impeachable that Donald Trump brought up his rival with the Ukrainian president. How are those things not in some ways the same? that's why I think you have a hard, no matter whether or not someone says, yes, I also heard this conversation. I think the problem for a lot of Trump voters is they just don't understand why one thing was okay and one thing is supposedly a reason to be taken out of office.
One thing that was really fascinating over the weekend, NBC News released their new impeachment poll over the weekend, and President Trump still has a fervent amount of support of his supporters. 91% of his supporters don't believe in impeachment. One thing that was interesting is we're starting to see mild, not a tremendous, but a mild fractioning of traditional Republican voters, not necessarily Trump voters, that are gradually starting to get to impeachment. And this has led a lot of Washington insiders to worry that it might be those Mike Enzes and the Lamar Alexanders, those old school traditional Republicans that are not seeking re-election to maybe be the jurors that might vote for impeachment for President Trump. How much of a worry are traditional Republican voters for President Trump right now?
Right now, I don't think they are much at all. And again, it's because, and again, gets to the book, what a lot of voters out there, even those traditional Republican voters, even if they're not the biggest fans of Donald Trump, they're very concerned about the standards of this inquiry at the moment. And yes, you're seeing a little tiny, but these are small numbers.
Yeah.
And so, for them, again, this isn't even necessarily about Trump. It's about our institutions. It's about our norms. In the past, impeachment, you held it out for the absolute. We're going to have an election next year. A lot of people are saying, why are we going through all of this? And shouldn't we be holding back on this for a point at which we really, really need it?
We only have about a minute left with you, Kimberly, but one fascinating thing a trader at the New York Stock Exchange told me, he was a supporter of President Trump's, but the one thing he was worried about was Trump fatigue, that he voted for him mainly because he did want to vote for Hillary Clinton, but he said, I'm kind of already exhausted by President Trump. He's got all these cable channels talking about him all day. Is there a worry maybe about Trump fatigue at one point?
So I think that this is one of the biggest things that the Trump administration faces, because you do have this campaign by Democrats and by a lot of people in the media. It's sustained. They dislike this president. They can't, and they are determined that anything he does, even if it's things that people have done in the past, they're going to turn it around and make it out to be a very big deal. And I think part of that is, in fact, aimed at making people feel like we can't do 4 more years of this. Arguing against that are going to be a lot of people who, they might not even like this president that much, but they really dislike those tactics. And so they might go and vote for him, even when they might not have otherwise, just to send a message.
Fascinating conversation. Kimberley Strassel, she's got a new book out called Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. Kimberly, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.